Hello everyone, and welcome to the fifth episode of my talk show, Cerita. I'm your host, Natalia, and I'm a 14-year-old writer and the author of the ebook The Cat on the Bridge, which you can check out in the caption below. So, if this is your first time watching, welcome. Thank you for taking your time on a Saturday to actually tune in into this short 30-minute session. And if you just by any chance stumbled upon this link to this session and you have absolutely zero idea what this is all about, do listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once. So, this is Cerita. It's a place where I speak to different people who love and hold a great respect for the written art, but also words in general. And I don't just mean writers like myself or even just published authors, because if there's one thing about me is that I love talking to the lesser known people and hearing their stories, their takeaways, and the lessons that they have learned along their journey. Because it is one thing I know is that each person has a unique story to tell, and it's this place is basically just a way of us hearing those stories and letting those stories loose into the world. And speaking of unique stories, I actually have someone who will be coming in shortly, who I think has a lot of stories to tell us, like literally, because his work is literally to tell stories. And at first glance, people will see him as a storyteller, but he refers to himself as a story practitioner. Why? Well, I also don't know, because that's something that we will uncover in a moment. But for the time being, please let's welcome the amazing Johnny Gillet to the screen. Hi,
Hi,
Johnny.
hi
How
Natalia.
are
Good to
you?
see you. I'm well, thank you.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this talk show that I have. It means a lot. It means a lot. Thank you so much.
It's a
Before
real
we get before we get into the deep questions, I would say, I like to open with a little icebreaker question. I like to ask this question to anyone who comes on my talk show, which is, what is your favorite book?
yeah. Oh, that's actually a really tough question. I'm
That's
sure
what
nobody.
everyone says.
Yeah, but quite often I refer to I. It's a story, but I think you can buy it just as one book. But it's such a short story that I think they compiled it with other short stories by the same author. And this is a short story by J.R.R. Tolkien, who's well known
Ooh,
for a massive book, right? The Lord of the Rings.
yeah.
But he wrote some short stories as well. Do you know his short stories?
I only know The Hobbit. I don't know any
Ah,
of his other stories.
even shorter than The Hobbit. And The Hobbit's quite long for a children's book, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
that really short stories. So he wrote one short story, which is called Smith of Wootton Major. And it's a really
Ooh.
bizarre title, right? and
Interesting title.
The Smith of Wootton Major is a story of somebody who is like a blacksmith, but it begins with actually a children's party, and how every so often they have this very special cake, and in the cake there's a trinket you can find, and it turns out that this trinket actually is something from fairyland, and whoever gets that trinket, something will happen to them, and it's uh, I don't want to say too much because I want people to find the book for themselves. But this story quite often is included in other short stories by Tolkien, but you can buy it sometimes on its own. And I read this story
Ooh.
long, long ago when I was really into Tolkien in my teens. And when I read it, it really, it just so captured me and really moved my heart. I was in tears as I was reading it. And still, when I read it today, it moves me to tears. And it is a
Yeah.
really, I find it such a magical, inspiring book that not only kind of like touched my heart, but it's very inspiring as a writer, as a aspiring writer. I was inspired by this book as well.
Yeah, really shows just the power of words that it has on you. Like you read it, like you came across it in your teens, but until now, like it holds a big memory in your head. And yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely need to check that book out. Maybe I will cry as well. Who knows? But I can get
Every so
emotional when
often,
reading books.
if I have a moment in the house alone, like in the evening or something, every so often I will find that story and I will sit down and just read it because it only takes like 45 minutes to read, and uh,
Alright.
and I just go back to that world again. It's a beautiful book, beautiful story.
Okay, you have me hooked. I'll definitely have to find that story for myself. But yes, that's our little icebreaker question. So, now moving on into the bulk of this session. My first question, definitely, I have to ask, why do you refer to yourself as a story practitioner? Because
Uh,
a lot, like at first glance, like you're a storyteller, right? So, what's the difference between a storyteller or a story practitioner? Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me just first of all tell you why I chose that title. Because the thing is, the word storytelling and therefore a storyteller, those words have so many different applications. So you could be like a film director, and people will call you a storyteller. You can be
Mm,
somebody who goes and collects like the life stories of people, and then you perhaps put that into a newspaper article as a journalist, or you put that into some kind of book, and you're known as a storyteller in that respect as well.
right.
So for me, storyteller is a very broad title, but I found that when I got into like storytelling, and I did that in a traditional sense, like someone who just sits with a group of people by the fire and tells stories. That's how I started off, right? Like that. I found that I was getting opportunities to work with all these other people using storytelling to mean different things. So,
Right.
journalists, therapists, community workers, film directors. So I thought, what is storyteller, and what am I doing? So then I thought, well, I work with stories. I help people to know how to construct and use stories. So I thought, well, I am in the practice of working with stories. So I called myself a story practitioner. So it's more than just telling stories. I'm really into how stories work, how stories can be applied, and what stories can
Mm.
do, and how you might need to really be sensitive to how you're telling that story because of the people that are listening and what it might create within them, and just being fully aware of what you're doing. So I call myself a story practitioner.
Interesting. So, like a story practitioner, sorry, a story practitioner, is it like basically like a slightly more advanced version of a storyteller in a way?
Yeah, actually, when people, so story practitioner is someone who does story practice, right? And
Yeah.
I often say that story practice is when we are working beyond storytelling. So you have
Right.
to
Oh,
know about storytelling to work beyond storytelling.
wish. Wow. That's actually cut deep into my soul. That line, that right there. Such wow, I think you explained it pretty well. I all this while I had no idea what was the difference between both, but now I do. Thank you for that. Okay, interesting. Definitely, it's like a little bit more analytical, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
like
So
not just telling the story, but like also going in depth of how you tell the story
yeah,
and like how
yes.
it works around certain people, which is interesting. Okay,
Do
very
you know the
nice.
word? Do you know the word narratology?
No, I don't think so. Sorry.
Okay, so narratology is an academic word for the study of narrative. And a story practitioner is someone who certainly understands about narratology. We understand how narratives work.
Mm,
So, narratives are the way in which you choose to arrange all the information in your story so that you take your readers or your listeners through a certain journey, right? But you may choose to arrange that differently depending on how you're telling the story, who you're telling the story to. And all of those different
mm,
ways of arranging those events create different effects, and understanding how those effects work, that's narratology. The story practitioner uses a lot of narratology.
yeah. You've definitely like have so much experience in this uh area. I feel so afraid now being talking to you right now. But yeah, it's it's a lot definitely to take in, and it's just amazing how far you've come, like to teaching and coaching other people in stories. And like I was just wondering, because like everyone has to start somewhere, right? So how did you come to realize that this kind of stories, it's something that you love and you want to like have like work in?
Well, look, firstly, I have to say, like many people, I've always loved a good story. And
Mm-hmm.
I've always been enchanted by the idea of other worlds. Okay, I think we have to stop. The Azan's about to come.
Yeah, so I can tell that you definitely have so much experience in in like the stories area. Definitely you have like so much passion for it, but everyone, like, they have to start somewhere, right? So I'm just curious, like, how did you start? Like, how did you come to realize that stories, it's something that you want to work in, something that you want to do?
Well, I think like everyone loves a good story. So I think I'm like just like everyone else in many ways. As a kid, I like to listen to stories. I like reading good stories, watching stories. Uh, but I was always really good in school at writing, especially writing
Mm.
stories. I realized that quite young, and I used to do other things. I would make comic books with my brothers as well,
Cool.
and I was the eldest of five kids, all boys, and I would tell stories to my brothers, stories that I would
Mm.
make up, and I think later on, I got into the theatre as a teenager and was
Right.
enjoying doing that. And that's all about being able to live in a story on stage, right? You can be the character in the story. Um,
Yes.
it's the closest you can get to going to some other world, right? So I think that was all happening for me throughout my life. And so I think when I was young, I had aspirations of being an author. But I didn't know how you do that, and you have done that. Kind of at the age when I was trying to work out how you do that. But anyway,
Thank you.
yeah. So it's always been there for me, and I've always had a love for especially folklore and myths and legends, um, those kinds of stories, and I'm fascinated by that. Always have been fascinated by that because of the myriad of magical creatures that could be in those stories, but also the way that they reflect different cultures, which gives some idea
Right.
of the people and the history. So I've had all that going on, and I guess I've just taken every opportunity to pursue those particular passions as they come into my life.
Mm. Wow, very, very interesting. Yeah, I that is definitely a unique journey. Like, but it's interesting because like you already kind of figured out that what your talent was, and then you just found something that just related to your talent. Because like some people, they don't know, they have no idea what their talent is. They don't know what they're good at. Like that part isn't so clear. But like, you kind of knew, like, you were clear about what you were good in, what your gift was, and then so the
Yeah,
next thing was, yeah, kind of
but the
figuring
thing is,
out, I guess, like what to do with that.
I didn't become like a published author for a long time. and I didn't
Mm,
uh, and I didn't know really about this whole thing about being a professional storyteller. So I became an
right.
actor, right? So
Ah,
I trained as an actor. I did a lot. So from when I was doing stuff as a teenager, as I say, that gave me a lot of opportunities to perform on stage, and I got the sense that I was good at it. So then I went on to take that further, and I became a professional actor, and then became a theatre director. So I was storytelling in that way. But then I was always hanging on to this kind of romantic idea of someone who could just sit and tell stories and keep people enchanted just from speaking, from images in their head that they share with the listeners, right? And I had some
mhm.
opportunities to do that later in life, like my late 20s. I had some opportunities to do that, tried out. I liked doing it, but I didn't really pick it up again until my late 30s, uh, when I decided to create this character called the Journeyman, who was going to be this persona that would come and enchant you with stories that he's gathered from all over the world.
Yeah, that why did you pick The Journeyman? What made you think of that specific title?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I had this kind of sort of crisis point in my life, as it were, where I was thinking, what am I going to do with myself?
Right.
And I thought through everything I'd done up until that point. And I thought, well, I've traveled a lot. I've always been interested in the stories, the history, the legends of all the countries I've been to, all the places I've worked in. So I have all these stories in my head. I have my love of stories. I can tell a good story. So then I thought, and it was like this image came to me of a guy with a big hat, and he has this stick, a bit like Gandalf, but a bit younger. And he is carrying with him all these strange objects that he's collected from his journeys around the world. And each one is hanging on the stick, and he takes it off, and he can tell you a story about this thing. That was like an idea that I had, a shtick, if you like. And I thought, okay, that guy would be called the journeyman. And that's the guy I'm going to create as like a storytelling persona. And I'm going to see if I can sell that to, anyone that's interested, festivals, schools, libraries, anyone, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally picture like how the journeyman will look in my head right now. It's just like walking from like town to town, like just telling stories. That's amazing, really. And it's perfect actually that you mentioned traveling, because I know that you've worked in storytelling in over 40 different countries, which I'm impressed that you have gone to that many countries. Like I've only gone like to 2 countries abroad, and you've gone to 40 different countries. So that's amazing. So
When I was
like
your age,
like
I'd only been to 2 countries also. So you've got time. You've got time.
yeah, I've got time. I have my whole life ahead of me. But yeah, you've been to 40 different countries. So like what were some of your experiences traveling to those other countries, before you came to Malaysia?
Well, I've had many, many experiences, Natalia. I
Three.
think 3 significant experiences. Okay, so I think one of the most significant would be when I worked in East Africa, in Kenya. And
Oh,
at that time, I was predominantly working as a mime artist. So that's the opposite end of storytelling. I now work with words. That's without words, right? And
interesting.
yeah, but the thing was, the people in Kenya were so unused at the time to seeing somebody do this European style mime that they didn't
Right.
understand it. So what I had to do was tell stories while I was doing the mime. So I would kind of explain things and act them out at the same time. And this was because the people of Kenya have a very deeply entrenched storytelling culture, right? And it was like, okay, so how do I weave that together, the storytelling and the mime? And actually, that was the beginning of a style that I developed before it's like 10 years before the journeyman was ever thought of. But it's a style that I used a lot later. So my storytelling is a very physical thing. And even though it
Right.
may not be traditional mime, you can see that there is the influence there. And that's because when I was in Kenya, I had to add words to the mime so that the people could get some kind of
Right.
understanding. Yeah. Yeah. And
No,
then
that's a good one.
I tell you another a funny one that happened to me was, well, I was working in Poland, and we were working kind of right in the middle, out in the countryside somewhere, and we had a stage, and we were performing on the stage, and the stage broke while we were performing on it. Right?
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. So we were at this place for like 2 weeks. This was like first day, second day, something like that. The stage broke. We have like 2 more weeks where we perform here. So then we had this debriefing meeting after the performance, and we said the stage is broken. It's like it's not safe
Like
to
sound.
perform on. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's got to be fixed. And they say, yeah, we'll fix it. So the next day comes round, and we get to the time when we perform. The stage is not fixed. So we have to do the best
Uh.
we can to try to perform on this stage with this kind of hole in it, right? And then the debrief meeting, we said, the stage isn't fixed. This is dangerous. We can't do this much more. They said, oh, yeah, we'll fix it. We'll fix it. The next day comes. We go on
And
stage.
then,
It's not fixed, but
oh no.
we do our best. We try to perform. And then in the middle of our performance, through the audience come these 2 men carrying big pieces of wood through the audience. And we
Now,
moved.
like now.
Yeah, now they fix it in the middle of the performance.
Oh,
So
that-
everyone waits. And these two guys, they come up, they can't speak English, but they smile and they start fixing it, and it's fixed. I mean, it takes maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes to fix. They fix it, and then we can perform again.
well, that is quite funny actually.
And you know what?
Wow,
They
but
didn't say, okay, let's take a break, everyone go out, have some drinks, use the bathroom, whatever. No, everyone sat and waited and watched the guys fix it. It was a drama of its own.
I wonder if some of the audience they actually thought it was part of the show, like
Maybe,
just them
maybe,
fixing the
maybe.
thing.
Yeah.
That must have
Yeah.
been pretty comical to watch, though.
Yeah. Well, it was. You just thought, okay, I'm in somebody else's country. This is the way they do things. I just let it go. I
Thank
don't
you for
know.
sharing that.
Uh, so
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's
I mean, traveling to all these different countries always brings a challenge, but the challenges always give me another story.
interesting. Yeah, like those kind of challenges, you see, like you mentioned some of those challenges, like what the stage breaks, which is like kind of like a practical kind of challenge, right? But like in terms of the art, like the storytelling art itself, like do you think there are any sort of challenges that are unique to that specific area that maybe another area doesn't have it? For example, uh, let's say shooting a video, obviously, or like filmmaking, it's still storytelling, but in terms of because you're a story practitioner, so is there something that is different, like in terms of the challenges that you face?
Well, okay, so as a story practitioner, one of the challenges I face is that people generally nowadays think that storytelling is a good thing. They recognize it's a buzzword, right? A lot of people want to do good storytelling. They've got to include stories in their presentations, right?
Mm,
But they don't know what that is really, and they also are afraid that they will be judged on their storytelling, and they want to go back to using data and reports, case studies, these kinds of things, right? Because they know that when they give some kind of presentation, how that will be received. They know how to do that. But when it comes to using a story, people are so nervous and so worried about it. And they
right.
know it's supposed to be valuable, but they're not quite sure how it's valuable. So I have to spend a lot of time trying to make people feel comfortable and confident and really reassuring them that they have a good story to tell. Because a lot of people, when they tell their own story, they think, well, this is normal for me. It's nothing special. I think I don't think it's relevant to what I'm doing, and I have to try to reassure them I have to really help people a lot to recognize how they can tell a good story, and it's worth it.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because like a lot of people they're kind of afraid of what others would think of them, right? If like they act a certain way or they tell the story a certain way. Like, am I being like over dramatic? Or
Yeah,
am I being like too like a little less dramatic, not dramatic enough? So that kind of like feeds into the mind, like the fear
yeah.
of like people
And
like what you said,
one of
like
the things
people will
that
judge.
people always worry about is will what happens if I forget the story, and what if people can't see the relevance of my story. Those are two big
Mm,
worries people have. So I
the
have to help them.
relevance of the story.
I have to help them. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting, interesting. And the relevance of the story. Like the second fear that you said.
So quite often people they're going to use a story as part of a presentation, right? It may be as part of some training they are delivering, or as part of giving a report on certain findings that have happened, and they need to use a story in there. They need to find a story that is going to uh, fulfill the purpose of using a story. Okay, so it's not just like,
Mm,
let me tell you a story just to kind of put a smile on your face. No, you tell a
right.
story because you want to illustrate a certain point, or you want to show the impact on somebody's life, or you want to give a sense of the issue that needs to be addressed, or you want to you want to inspire people to how change can be made, right? So you've got to
Yeah.
find a story that is going to enable that thinking, and your listeners have to get it. There's no point telling the story if the people
Mm.
don't.
Yeah, like each story, like you need to tell a story with purpose, right? That means like
Yes.
not just blindly tell, but I have like a goal in mind. Like, hey, what do I want the audience to feel? Like, what do I
Yeah.
want to achieve with my storytelling? Which it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I get it now. So like you've said that you know to there are different goals in terms of like telling your story, right? So I'm sure when you tell when there's a different goals, it's meant for different audiences. Like for maybe for you tell a story to children, it's a different goal. Maybe if you tell a story to like adults, it's a different goal. So I'm like wondering, you tell stories to many different people. Like I know you tell it to schools, to training centers, to youth, to even homeless shelters. So like how do you adapt your storytelling style to those different audiences?
And now you said a very key thing there. You said, how do you adapt your style, right? Because actually,
Mm.
I don't really think I have many stories that I would say these are for kids and these are for adults. What I
Mm.
generally find is a good story is a good story. Okay. But the style in which you tell it will be more suitable, or it needs to change to be suitable to the listener.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking to like kindergarten kids, I will tell that story in a certain way, but I can use the same story with a bunch of, I don't know, like
Mm.
managers or heads of
Right.
departments. Same story, because I feel the message of the story is relevant to them as well, just on a different level. So
Yeah.
so with the style, you can imagine with smaller children, I'm bigger, right? And I do voices.
Yes.
And I may get them involved to play characters and this kind of thing, right? With a group of managers or executives, I would be more. I would probably not move around quite so much. I would stand up straighter. My voice might be more measured, but still, I actually find that even adults love a little bit of creativity. They like a little bit of
True.
fun and fantasy. Right? So I put that in
True.
there as well. But sometimes the humor, of course, might be more suitable to an adult
Mm.
in the sense of like the adult might see the irony of a situation more, right? So I can play with that more. So yes, the style on a simple level is a lot of it's to do with how you use your voice, how you stand, the kind of person you're presenting yourself to be. But the story itself is pretty much the same.
Yeah. No, it's very, very interesting. Like I like how you said like you can use the same story for a child but also an adult, but you just change the way you present it, which is very interesting because like a lot of people, they would think like those fairy tales are like specifically for children and children alone, but I've seen you've told like fairy tales to adults but in a different way, which is very, very interesting, I feel, because like in storytelling I feel there's no right or wrong in a sense
Well, I think
in like
as long
which
as you
story
are
to use.
communicating, as long as you are
Yeah.
communicating and you are putting images in the minds of your listeners, then
Mm,
you are doing storytelling right. You know.
yeah, very, very nice. I love that. I love the answer so much. I would love to hear so many of your opinions on so many other questions that I have in my head right now. But unfortunately, we are nearly coming to the end of our 30-minute session. Thank you so much for all of your valuable insights. I loved it so much. Before we end though, do you have any like tips or any little bits of encouragement, to aspiring writers or even storytellers who maybe they are storytellers, but they just you feel like they need to hear this.
I think anyone wanting to use stories, whether you're a writer or you want to use it as part of a presentation in a training context or anything, right? The key thing is to connect with that story personally. If you find your own connection to that story, like imagine yourself in it or you feel the emotions of it, then your storytelling, whether you write it down or whether you speak it out, will have so much more authenticity about it. And it will be
Right.
more unique as well, which means that it's your work that will stand out from others. So really find
Mm.
your own connection and really write from that place where you personally connect with the story.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Like it's a like it comes from deep inside you. That means it needs to come from your own mind, your own heart, kind of like you need to have like what you said, your own personal connection. Because like there's one thing I know is that if that personal connection isn't there, then you won't have fun doing it as well, because like you just don't feel like what the meaning of all of it is, because you don't feel connected to it. So I like that a lot. Thank you so much for that amazing Sherry Johnny. Just hearing the way you speak and explain everything is just it's a treat in itself. Okay, like from the way you speak, I can definitely tell that you love stories. You hold like a great respect for stories. You wouldn't be in this area, like working in this area, if you didn't. So I really respect that about you. And yes, thank you so much. And to everyone who is watching, thank you as well for staying until the end. I definitely hope that you learned something from this session and took some notes, because I will definitely be need to rewatch this session and again probably and take more notes, because the answers that our speaker gave is just so insightful. So I really hope that you had fun listening, and I will not give you the torture of listening to my voice any longer. So I will end this session soon. So once again, thank you for coming, and to the audience, I will see you next month. Bye.